The debate has gone on for years. Is the book or the movie better? Most people always say the book is better, and some people vary depending on the book or movie. But for The Lord of the Rings, many people are torn which is better, the original books or the Peter Jackson adaptation of the trilogy. Everyone knows something about The Lord of the Rings. These books have sold over 150 million copies worldwide and were translated into 52 different languages. The three books, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King, took Tolkien 17 years to write and even longer to plan. He began his journey to write The Lord of the Rings essentially as a child when he became obsessed with languages. But what truly began as a simple sequel to his previous bestseller, The Hobbit, turned into a worldwide phenomenon. And when Tolkien at last sent in his final copy of his book to the publishers, he wrote, "It is written in my life's blood, such as that is, thick and thin, and I can no other." He also said that he dreaded publication as it would be impossible not to mind what is said. He added that he had exposed his heart to be shot at. The Fellowship of the Ring was published in late July of 1954, and because of the wild responses, The Two Towers was released 3 months later. The last book, The Return of the King, was published in October of 1955, and Tolkien became an immediate celebrity. He disliked his fame, but dealt with it until the end of his life in 1973. In the early 2000s, Hollywood director Peter Jackson announced that he would be releasing a trilogy of movies based on Tolkien's best-selling series. Together, they received nearly $3 billion worldwide and received 11 Oscars just for The Return of the King. And these movies became an instant classic for everyone. The Lord of the Rings became one of those trilogies that everybody reads or watches, or both. And if the person didn't, they were frowned upon by fans who couldn't understand why these uncultured people had not been able to get into Tolkien. But the debate still goes on. Which is better, the original book series or the film trilogy? Many say Peter Jackson's trilogy is better for several reasons. One is Tolkien's diction in the trilogy. He writes with a very high diction, which gives the books a more lofty feel than his previous book, The Hobbit. This elegant writing form bores many, especially when coupled with Tolkien's descriptions, which sometimes drag on for several pages. Jackson's films have both the grandeur of the originals and the snap of a movie, needing less talk and more action. Many of these people also say that the changes that Jackson made in the films improved the story. Tom Bombadil, a merry lunatic-like character from The Fellowship of the Ring who befriends the hobbits on their way to Bree, is left out, as well as Aragorn, Pippin's friend from The Return of the King. Aragorn is shown to be conflicted, unsure of whether he truly wishes to take the throne of Gondor, and Arwen, his love, is given far more screen time than the books decreed. Other changes, like the army of the dead aiding Aragorn before Minas Tirith, Aragorn's beheading the mouth of Sauron, and Treebeard's original refusal to destroy Isengard, gave the movies a twist that many people were not expecting, but now forget is a change at all and consider canon. They insist that these changes made Tolkien's old works more realistic and modernized his thinking. Also, they claim that the visual side of The Lord of the Rings is so much better, and that Tolkien's themes shine through via these visuals. Themes like hope and despair are both illustrated by the light and dark, the light and joy of the elves, the men, dwarves, and hobbits, and the dark of Sauron and Saruman and their minions, shown in the films. But on the other hand are the books. Tolkien little knew how his works would become iconic for the world. When Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11th birthday with a party of special magnificence, there was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. That is how Tolkien began The Lord of the Rings. He goes through the story of the War of the Ring methodically, not rushing over anything important. In fact, he goes so far as to put in many things that some think is not necessary. But every word that Tolkien wrote, in fact, is very necessary for this story. Would Peter Jackson have been able to do as good a job in his movies if he didn't have Tolkien's works describing the people, places, and explaining thoughts and actions? No, because Tolkien's attention to detail, the movies were made possible. The storyline for The Lord of the Rings is also very important. Tolkien spent 17 years writing and perfecting the plot for his trilogy. From Hobbiton to Mount Doom, he shows a clearly well thought out plot. Every element is necessary to his work. The beginning of the story, Bilbo's birthday party, shows foreshadowing as to what will happen at the end with the Grey Havens. In the first chapter, Bilbo is seen leaving the Shire, telling everyone he knows goodbye. Bilbo did not sing and recite, the Fellowship of the Ring says. He paused for a moment. Thirdly and finally, he said, "I wish to make an announcement." He spoke this last word so loudly and suddenly that everyone sat up who still could. "I regret to announce that, though, as I said, 11 years is too short a time to spend among you all. This is the end. I am going. I am leaving now. Goodbye." Thirdly, from that moment, Bilbo left the Shire, never to return. This draws Frodo into the affairs of the Ring of Power, and before long he has to leave as well. He as well tries to say goodbye, though it doesn't end as well as Bilbo's. Pippin says in The Fellowship of the Ring, "Dear old Frodo, did you really think you had thrown dust in all our eyes? You have not been nearly careful or clever enough for that. You have obviously been planning to go and saying farewell to all your haunts all this year since April. We have constantly heard you muttering, 'Shall I ever look into that valley again, I wonder,' and things like that, pretending like you had come to the end of your money and actually selling your beloved Bag-End to the Sackville Bagginses, and all those close talks with Gandalf." These show that, in the end, what the evil in the world of Middle-earth will drive people from their homes. Even if they have succeeded in their quest, they are still never going to be able to return the way they were. They won't be able to escape unscathed or unchanged. Frodo travels to Rivendell, meeting Aragorn, who is, in Tolkien's works, someone who has served Gondor before secretly, and is waiting for the proper time to go to Minas Tirith and take his title. Frodo is sent on his quest to Mount Doom with 8 others: Aragorn, Gandalf the Wizard, Sam, Pippin and Merry, the 3 other hobbits, Legolas, Gimli, and Boromir from Gondor. Together they travel as far as they can before splitting into 3 groups. Then Frodo and Sam continue their trek to Mount Doom. The amount of work that Tolkien put into his writings is clearly shown. His imagery, the best part of his books, brings it to life. Tolkien brings his characters' fear and worry to life, making the readers feel as if they are in the same danger that the characters are in. Take this example from The Fellowship of the Ring. This is a part the movies left out. Frodo and the other hobbits on their way to Bree are captured by Barrow-wights. Frodo wakes up in a barrow to this. But though his fear was so great that it seemed to be a part of the very darkness that was around him, he found himself, as he lay thinking about Bilbo and his stories, of their jogging along together in the lanes of the Shire, or talking about roads and adventures. There is a seed of courage, often deeply hidden, it is true, in the heart of the fattest and most timid hobbit, waiting for some final and desperate danger to make it grow. Frodo was neither very fat nor very timid. Indeed, though he did not know it, Bilbo and Gandalf, who had thought him the best hobbit in the Shire, he thought he had come to the end of his adventure, and a terrible end, but the thought hardened him. He found himself stiffening, as if for a final spring. He no longer felt limp like a helpless prey. As he lay there thinking and getting a hold of himself, he noticed all at once that the darkness was slowly giving way. A pale greenish light was growing around him. It did not at first show him what kind of place he was in, for the light seemed to be coming out of himself, and from the floor beside him, and had not yet reached the roof or wall. He turned, and there, in the cold glow, he saw lying beside him Sam, Merry, and Pippin. They were on their backs, and their faces looked deadly pale. Across their 3 necks, one long naked sword lay. Suddenly, a song began, a cold murmur, rising and falling. The voice seemed far away and immeasurably dreary, sometimes high in the air and thin, and sometimes like a low moan from the ground. Out of the formless stream of sad but horrible sounds, strings of words would now and again shape themselves, grim, hard, cold words, heartless and miserable. After a while the song became clearer, and with dread in his heart he perceived that it had changed into an incantation. Tolkien brings things to life in a way I have not found in many authors. He wrote 14 languages for his world of Middle-earth and used them all. He writes songs and poems in the languages of Rohan, the elves, both Sindarian, the Grey Elves, and Quenya, the High Elves, dwarves, and the languages of Númenóreans, aka Gondorians. He also has conversations in languages with orcs and many others. The poems he writes brings depth to the story and a history that few authors have ever gone into detail with. Aragorn recites a poem in the language of the Rohirrim before translating it into the common tongue in the Two Towers. That makes it seem as though Middle-earth is a real place and that its history is real. "It runs thus in the common speech," said Aragorn, "as near as I can make it. Where now is the horse and the rider? Where is the horn that was blowing? Where is the helm and the hauberk, and the bright hair flowing? Where is the hand on the harp string and the red fire glowing? Where is the spring and the harvest, and the tall corn growing? They have passed like rain on the mountain, like a wind in the meadow. The days have gone down in the west, behind the hills into shadow. Who shall gather the smoke of the dead wood burning, or behold the flowing years from the sea returning?" Thus spoke a poet long ago in Rohan, recalling how tall and fair was Eöl the Young, who rode down out of the north, and there were wings upon the feet of his steed, Faralaf, father of horses. So men still sing in the evenings. Tolkien's themes, which are so clearly shown in the film trilogy, are yet more clear in the books. The despair shown in the books are most clearly seen in the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, in The Return of the King. Mordor has attacked Gondor with but a fraction of its strength, and yet Minas Tirith crumbles before the onslaught. And now the fighting waxed furious on the fields of Pelennor, and the din of arms rose high with the crying of men and the neighing of horses. Under the south walls of the city, the footmen of Gondor now drove against the legions of Morgul that still gathered there in strength. But the horsemen rode eastward to the succor of Eomer, Hurin the Tall, Warden of the Keys, and the Lord of Lasarnach, and Hurlin of the Green Hills, and Prince Imrahil the Fair with his knights about him. The great wrath of Eomer's onslaught had utterly overthrown the front of his enemies, and great wedges of his riders had passed clear through the ranks of the Southrons, discomfiting their horsemen and riding their footmen to ruin. But wherever the Mumakil went, the horses would not go, but blanched and swerved away, and the great monsters were unfought and stood like towers of defense, and the Haradrim rallied about them. It was even as the day thus began to turn against Gondor, and their hope wavered, that a new cry went up in the city. It had been then mid-morning, and a great wind blowing, and the rain flying north, and the sun shining. In that clear air, watchmen on the wall saw afar a new sight of fear, and their last hope left them. For Anduin, from the bend at the Harlond, so flowed that from the city men could look down it lengthwise for some leagues, and the far side could see any ships that approached. Looking thither, they cried in dismay, for black against the glittering stream they beheld a fleet borne up on the wind, dromons, and ships of great draught with many oars, and with black sails flying in the breeze. "The corsairs of Umbar!" men shouted. "The corsairs of Umbar! Look, the corsairs are coming! So Falas is taken, and Ithir, and Lebanon is gone. The corsairs come upon us. It is the last stroke of doom." But even in the worst situations, joy and hope shines through. Through Aragorn's arrival, disaster is averted, and Minas Tirith lives on, and Aragorn leads his men to the Black Gate to buy Frodo more time to destroy the ring. Frodo and Sam, meanwhile, have almost reached the Mountain of Fire, and even there, in the darkest place of Middle-earth, they still hope. Sam looked back at Frodo and wept in his heart, but no tears came to his dry and stinging eyes. "I said I'd carry him if it broke my back," he muttered, "and I will." "Come, Mr. Frodo," he cried. "I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you, and it as well. So up you get. Come on, Mr. Frodo, dear. Sam will give you a ride. Just tell him where to go, and he'll go." Tolkien's visuals are probably the most vivid of any author I've ever read. One of my personal favorite examples of this is from The Return of the King, just before the riders of Rohan entered the battle in the Pelennor Fields. Still they were unchallenged, and still Theoden gave no signal. At last he halted once again. The city was now nearer. A smell of burning was in the air, and the very shadow of death. The horses were uneasy, but the king sat upon Snowmane, motionless, gazing out upon the agony of Minas Tirith, as if stricken by anguish or by dread. He seemed to shrink down, cowed by age. Merry himself felt as if a great weight of horror and doubt had settled on him. His heart beat slowly. Time seemed poised in uncertainty. They were too late. Too late was worse than ever. Perhaps they would quail, bow his old head, turn, slink away to hide in the hills. At that sound, oh wait. Then, as the darkness closed again, there came the rolling over the fields a great boom. And at that sound the bent shape of the king sprang suddenly more erect. Tall and proud he seemed again, and rising in his stirrups he cried in a loud voice, more clear than ever had been heard by mortal men. Arise, arise, riders of Theoden! Fell deeds awake, fire and slaughter! Spears shall be shaken, shields shall be splintered. A sword day, a red day, ere the sun rises. Ride now, ride to Gondor! But throughout the entire series, despite the odds, hope that good will prevail shines clearly through Tolkien's works. Though he often rejected this idea that he had written his books off of the Bible, especially the Book of Revelation, his faith shows itself in his work, something that is completely lost in the films. Aragorn is shown as Christ, who is returning to put all to right in the world. Frodo and Sam are like Christian in Pilgrim's Progress as they journey from their home to rid themselves of the burden of evil laid upon them. And after all is completed, they return from the darkness of Mordor to the joy of Aragorn's kingdom, and then home to the Shire. The creature Gollum, who had once been Smeagol, was based off a person who has been raised in the church, but who leaves it to follow his own desires, and is twisted beyond recognition into a creature consumed by his own sinful lusts, both wanting to be saved and refusing to allow himself to be changed, finally to be destroyed in his stubborn rebellion, as Proverbs 29 says, suddenly and without remedy. The films lose sight of this, and in their change of the character of Aragorn, they change him from the savior king who brings healing as well as skill in war, to a man who lacks confidence in his power to rule, and so has decided never to be king. While much can be said on either side of this topic, due to the content of Tolkien's works, the plot he so laboriously worked on displayed in his writings, and the clear Christian worldview illuminating the pages of his books, the Lord of the Rings books are the better of the two choices. Once again, the books win in the question of books versus movies.